In this video, we're going to be writing unit tests to test the functionality of the different endpoints we have created. So when I go to my Insomnia, I can be able to send a request such as want to get a recipe. So this can return a recipe. And this is what we refer to as manual testing. So I'm manually testing output that the system can give provided an input. And even if I went to, let me say, getting all recipes and then made a request and then received a list of recipes, this means I'll be testing my app, but this will be manually. However, if our project gets bigger and bigger as we add more features, this creates the need for us to create what we call automated tests. In this video, we are going to be writing automated tests that are going to help us to test our application automatically. So to do this, I'm going to just go to my VS Code, and within our VS Code, you have the different logic that is attached to our different routes or different endpoints. So to do this, I'm going to use the unit test module within Python. So this is going to be what I'm going to use to test the different logic of our application. So we're going to be unit testing, and unit testing is testing the simplest functionality of an application, such as if we make a request to what route, what response do we receive? So that's what you're going to be seeing in this video. So to get started, I'm going to just come within my backend folder. I'm going to create a simple module. I'm going to keep it simple. So this is going to be our test API.py. And within our test API.py is where we're going to write all our tests for this video. So I'm going to import unit test. After importing unit test, I'll also have to import the application factory class. So I mean the application factory function, which is create all, the one we created in our main.py in the previous videos. So I'm going to say from main import, this is going to be our create app. Now after importing this create app, another thing we're going to need is the configuration for testing. So when I go to config.py, we are having our development config, our production config, and our test config. Now we haven't yet set up our configurations for the testing. So I'll come and put this configuration here in the class of test config. And the first thing I'll have to do is to specify which database we're going to use. So I'll say SQL Alchemy. In this case, I'll say SQL Alchemy. So going to be Alchemy. So let's say this is going to be our Alchemy database URI. So I'll first specify the database URI we're going to use in this example. So the database URI in this case, we're going to specify it as SQLite, and then we shall have our test DB. So this is going to be the database onto which we are going to carry out our testing. Another important thing that you'll have to set is the SQL Alchemy echo. So in this case, we shall set it to false. So I'll set it to false so that you don't get any SQL generated. And now the next thing I also set is testing equals to true. So this is going to help us to give less error catching, as this will be helping us while writing our applications. So to do this, I'm going to save and then come back to our test API.py. So I'll import the test config by saying from config, I'm going to import our test config. After importing this test config, I'm going to go ahead and create what we call a unit test, test case. So a test case in unit test is a class that inherits from unit test.testCase. So you're going to go ahead and create that by saying class. So this is going to be I'm just going to call it API test case because it's going to have all the tests for this API. I'll call this API test case, and then it's going to inherit from unit test and dot test case. So this is going to be dot test case. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be creating a tearDown and setup function. So a setup function helps us to declare the different variables we're going to be using for our tests. For example, we may need an application variable, a client variable, just like we're going to see. So to create our setup function, I'm going to say def, and this is going to be set up. and then it's going to take himself, and then in this case we're going to first create our application. So we may say self dot app is going to be equal to, so I'll create the app. So I'll say create app, and then pass in our config, because our create app function takes in our config. So in this case it's going to be our test. Sorry for this. It's going to be our test config. So after doing this, the next thing we're going to do is to be able to access our test client. So our test client is an interface that Flask provides for us to test our application. And using our test client, we can be able to make the different requests to the different routes associated with the application. So to create our client, I'm going to say self.client, and our client is going to be equal to self.app, then dot, this is going to be our test client. So this test client is going to take in the current app, so that's why I put the self. And now after doing this, the next thing is going to be to create our database. So I'm going to import DB or our SQL Alchemy instance. So when I go to our, so it's located within our ext, so I'm going to import this SQL Alchemy instance and then initialize it with the current app we are working with. So to do this, I have to be within an application context. So I'm just going to come and say with app. So this is going to be with self dot app dot, this is going to be app context. This is going to be within our app context. Then I'll come and simply create our database from here. So I'll say this is going to be db dot init app. So this is going to be init app, and then I'll say self dot app. And when I come right here, I'm going to come and say from exts import our db. So I have to import that db instance. So I'll just import it from there. So after, we shall have to create a database table. So I'll just say db dot create all. So when you look at this, what it does is to actually create a DB, but then it will create it in the context of the current app we are working on, and that is the app we have created with our setup function. So after creating our app, then we can also create a tearDown function that can help us to destroy whatever variables we created, such as the app, the client, and then all these instances of our DB. So to do that, I'm going to come and say it's going to be our, we're going to declare a function called tearDown. And then this function will also work within the context of our application. So what I'll do is to say self. So this will also be with self app context. So what we'll do is to delete all the sessions. So we shall do that by saying db session. This will be dot remove. And then the next thing we shall do is to actually drop all the tables. So to do that, I'll just say db dot, and this will be db dot drop all. So what I've actually done here is to actually create our setup function that initializes our database, creates our test application, and then a tearDown function that will also delete all the tables and remove whatever variables we have. So one thing I forgot is to actually say self. So when I add self here, we are going to have ourselves that's going to have the current app or the current test case we are working in. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to be writing the different test cases. But before I do that, when you write test cases, we always have to specify a test runner. So we haven't yet written the test runner. So the test runner involves the discovery stage where it helps us to discover whatever test we have written, and then it helps us to run those tests. So to write our test runner, I'm just simply going to come just below at the end of this code. So I'll say if underscore main is equal to, so that will be, actually this is going to be our name. If name is equal to main, then we shall just run our test runner. So I'll just say unit test main. So after doing this, if we save this and we came to our terminal. So I'm going to open up another terminal. This is the one that's having our server running. And within another terminal, I'm going to run our file by saying, and remember that you're running this in our virtual environment. So what I'll do is to actually say Python test api.py. So this is going to run our file, but since we haven't written any test cases or any tests, actually we haven't written any tests, it's going to say that it has run 0 tests. So let's test our first route. So let's first go to our Insomnia and see the test route we're going to test. I'm going to first test this hello route that simply takes in, so in this case it's recipe slash hello. So if I send this, expect that it's going to return hello world with a response status, with a status code of 200. After that, we need to come and test that route. So to test that route, I'll have to use our test client to make this request to that endpoint and then be able to test or assert if the value we have is equal to what we expect. So to do this, I'm going to come and create our first test. So I'm going to say def test hello world. So this is going to be hello world. And put in self. And after this, we always arrange our inputs, but in this case, what we're going to do is to actually create our response, and then from that response, we'll have to assert whether the output or the response is equal to what we are expecting. In this case, we are having our output being equal to hello world. So if we test, we need to assert if that response we've got in JSON is equal to hello world. So to do that, we need to come to the VS Code, and then the first thing I'll have to do is to create a variable which I'm going to call the hello world response. This is going to be what we get as our response from using our test client. So we're going to say self dot, actually this is going to be self dot client, then dot. In this case, we're going to specify our method as get because we want to send a get request to that specific route. In this case, I'll put in the route. So our route is going to be recipe slash hello. And after that, we expect that our hello world response is going to have things such as the response status code, the response JSON, and so on. So what I'll do is specify that our JSON in this case is going to be equal to hello world response dot JSON. So we're going to access this JSON as a dictionary. Now, we are going to assert whether the JSON we are having as our response is equal to the JSON that we're going to have. For example, we can come and just say, so we use the different assert methods within unit test by saying self dot. So when I say assert, you see all these different methods that we can use. So in this case, what we need is actually self dot assert equal. This is going to be assert equal. So the first argument we're going to pass in here is going to be equal to our JSON, and then we also pass in a dictionary containing the expected JSON. So in this case, we can have a dictionary saying a message, and this will be let's say hello world. So when I save this, I'm going to run our test. So I'm going to come and run our test by saying Python test api.py. So expecting that everything is fine, when you run this test, it's going to return okay. So when I run this, it's going to run our test. So it's going to tell us okay. So if we want to access this response JSON, we can actually print it out so that we get an assurance. So in this case, I can say print JSON. When I print that and come, so we can write Python test api.py. So this can return our response, which is similar to the response we have in our Insomnia, and that is good. So we are going to also test another application. So we're going to first test our login route, our sign up route, to see if it creates our users when we create them. After this, I'm going to close this. So I'm also going to make this for now, and when I come, I can be able to test that sign up route. So to do that, I'll come and say def, this is going to be test. So this will be test sign up, and it will take in self. After taking in self, then the first thing which I'll do is to get the response that we pass in. the response. The response we get as a result of signing up. So to do that, I'll just say sign up. So I'll call it a sign up response, and that is going to be equal to self dot client. So this is our test client and dot. So in this case, we specify a method of post. And after specifying our method of post, the next thing is going to be specifying the data that we're going to send as JSON to the API. So in this case, we can say JSON is equal to, so we pass in the JSON parameter, and then we specify the various data we send, the various fields that we send. So if we go back to our auth.py, and within the sign up route, we can see that what we require is let's say let's see this is going to be a username, an email, and a password. So when you go to our test API, we can be able to specify that we need a username. So let's say the username, and let's say this is going to be our test user. So I can call this test user. And then you can also have an email. So in this case, I can say email, or sorry, this is supposed to be a string. This can be an email, and this email can be equal to an email. So for example, we can have test user at test.com, and then we can also have our password. So if we have our password, we can say our password. So we can also specify the password as password. So I'm going to try to tidy this up. So when I come, I can put this on a different line, also put this on a different line so that we have things that are visible. So what we've done here is to create our response, and this response is going to be a response we get as a result of sending a post request to the route. So we haven't yet specified this route. So let's specify it. So the route for signing up users is to go to our /auth/signup. When you go there, we can come and say that we are making a request to a /auth/signup. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to try to, so our password here is also going to be a string, which is going to be our password. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to access the response. So let's try to see. So let's say that in this case, let's try to test the status code. So this method is supposed to return a status code of 201. So let's try to do that. So when we say status code, it's going to be equal to a sign up response dot a status code. So in this case, we're going to access the status code. After accessing this status code, we can assert whether this status code is equal to 201. So to do that, I'll say self dot assert equal. Then the first argument we pass in is our status code. So we're going to say this is going to be our status code. And then we can also say if it's going to be a 201 status code. So let's save this. After saving this, we are going to come to our terminal and then run our tests again. So right now we see that our test has failed. So in this case, the endpoint is returning 200, which is not equal to what we are asserting. In this case, is 201. So this is the importance of unit tests. They help us to discover the mistakes that we did while coding. When I go back to our auth.py, we can be able to fix the status code by specifying the status code you want. So in this case, you only have return JSONify message user created successfully. So what I'll do in this case is to actually make use of a function in Flask called make response. So make response can help you to create your response as well as specify which status code you're going to return. So to do that, I'll come and say make response. So I'm going to import make response from Flask, and then I come here, instead of saying JSONify only, I can actually say make response. So this will be JSONify, and then the message, and then after JSONifying, we can return the status code as 201. So when I save that, I come back to our test and run our test again. So when I run Python test API.py, in this case, we expect that it's going to run. So let's see. So in this case, we see that our tests are running successfully. Now, the next route we are going to test is the one that's going to log in our users. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go back to our test API.py, and I'm going to write that specific test for logging in a user. So what I'm going to actually do is to, because we are dealing with a test database that keeps on deleting the data, so I'm going to carry out a request to the sign up route. We get the response, and then we get that user, and then log in that user, and then access things like the access token or the refresh token in this case. So to do that, we need to come and say test. This is going to be test. Okay. So if you're observant, you see that the different tests I'm writing begin with test underscore and then whatever I want to test. So if I'm to write a test for login, I may say test login functionality or test user logs in or test this or test that, just like you can see here. This is also going to take itself, and then I have to first get this response of signing up. So I'm just going to copy this code. After copying this code, I'll have to just paste it right in here. So it's going to be sign up response. And after doing this, the next thing is going to be, because this user will be existing, now we shall also carry out the login request. So in this case, I'll say login response is going to be as a result of making a request. So in this case, I'll say self. This is going to be this will be client self.client then dot post. Since in this case we are making a post request, we have to specify the JSON we are sending. So in this case, when logging in, just like you can see now auth.I, we require a username and a password. So let's go ahead and see that. So when we see the JSON we're going to send is going to be, so I'll just have to copy this. After copying this, I'll just come and paste it in here. So what we require is our username and password. So after doing this, I'm going to basically come here and make sure that, okay, let's try to see if our status code is going to be 200. This means that if our login is successful, what I'll actually do is to actually say status code. So I'll say status code is going to be for login response, and then what we shall have to access is the status code in this case. So if that status code is okay, what I'll have to actually do is to, let's say, assert if the status code is okay. So to do that, I'll say self.assert equal, and then the first thing we shall put in is our status code, and then after that, I'll put in 200. So let's try to run this. Let's try to run this. So I can say Python test API.py. So we are having an error. So in this case, we are having assertion error 45 is not equal to 200. And this is happening because we haven't specified the route. So basically, 405 error is method not allowed for the requested URL. In this case, we haven't specified the URL. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll just close this for now. So when I say client.post, the first thing I have to specify is auth slash login, and then specify the JSON. So when I save this, I'll come right here and then say test API.py. So when we run this, so we see that now our test runs, which means that when we have our login route specified and then we pass in this JSON, we can be able to successfully log in. Now we can also be able to access the different things such as the JSON the server sends back. For example, in this case, we may say, let's say JSON, you can say JSON is going to be equal to a login response and dot JSON. So I can actually print this out to see the various JSON our server has sent us. So when I come and try to run this test again, so we see that when we log in with a username and a password, we can actually be able to access things such as the access token as well as the refresh token. So which means our login functionality is now working. So let's go ahead and make tests for the different routes that we carried out for creating, reading, and updating the different recipes resources. So I'm going to close this for now. So I'm going to come right in here and go to Insomnia. So I have getting all recipes, creating recipes, get a recipe, update a recipe, and delete a recipe. But to do this, I'm just going to come in here. So I'm going to create a different test function. So create first test. This is going to be a test. Then let's say get all recipes. So this is going to be get all recipes, and then it's going to be taking itself. So we're going to pass this for now, and then we're also going to create one that's going to say test get one recipe. So this is also going to take itself. So I'm going to pass this for now. And then another route we're going to test is the one for creating a recipe. So I'll say test create recipe. So this will be create recipe and then self. Then I'll pass this for now. And then another one is for actually updating. So I'll say def update. So in this case, I'll say update recipe. Then this is going to be update recipe self. So this is going to be test update recipe. So this will be test update recipe and then self. And then the next one is going to be the one for deleting. So I'll come and say def. So this is going to be deleting a recipe. So actually it's going to be test delete recipe. So this will be recipe itself. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be passing this. After passing this, I'm going to go ahead and create getting all recipes, getting one recipe, creating all recipes, and then updating and deleting. So I'm going to go ahead and test this. So the first route I'm going to test is the one for getting all recipes. So I'm going to come and just add some docstring. So this is going to be just going to say test getting all recipes. So after this, I'll create a request that kind of makes a request to that endpoint that brings all recipes, and then we assert depending on the output we get. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to say this is going to be our, so let's say our response is going to be self dot client. And in this case, we're going to just send a get request to that endpoint. So in this case, it's going to be slash recipe slash recipes, if I'm not mistaken. I'll go back to my Chrome, and when I go here, it's getting all recipes. When we go back to our code, then we shall maybe print the JSON. So in this case, I'm just going to go and print response .json. So we just want to check the data. When I save this, I'm going to pull up the terminal, and then first I'm going to first comment out where I print the login response. So and then run our test. So just like you can see, it has printed an empty list since we do not have any any things within our database. So this is making sure it's returning an empty list because we haven't yet added any resources to our API. So once this is done, I'm just going to come and maybe assert if the status code is that. So I'll just create a variable called the status code. Then the status code is going to be response dot status code. So after doing this, what I'm going to actually do is self assert equal. So in this case, I'm just going to assert if the status code is equal to 200. And after this is done, I'm just going to come right in here and test that route. So in this case, we see that all our tests are running. Let's go ahead and also write the test for getting one recipe. So getting one recipe, we need to query for that specific recipe and then be able to return it. So to do that, what I'm going to actually do is to actually make a database query that's going to return the ID of that recipe. Or I'll have to specify an ID and then get that ID that has that recipe. So to do that, what I'll have to do is to actually come and say def. So in this case, def, what I'll say is def, and actually not def, what I'll have to do is ID. So let me specify the ID as 1. So in this case, since we don't have anything in our database, we expect that it's going to return a 404 error. What I'll do is actually say our response is going to be equal to self dot client dot get, and then we shall just send request to slash recipe slash, this is going to be recipe, and then it's going to be ID. So I'll use an F string for this. So I'll say F and then pass in the ID, which is an integer. So this ID is going to be our ID. So now once this is done, we shall need to actually just get the status code. So what I'll say is status code going to be equal to response dot status code. And once I do that, I'll just say self dot assert equal, then I'll pass in the status code. Then the next thing will be to specify, because since we don't have anything in our database, if we query for that object with ID of 1, we are supposed to get a 404 error. So when they say 404 and save, we'll have to actually basically run this test and see if it will run as required. So now we see that our tests are running successfully, which means we don't have any errors, and this means that the status code is 404. Even if I were to print it out, for example, say print status code, so this will return 404. I run this, so it's going to return the status code as 404 since the recipe with that ID does not exist. So let's go ahead and create a route that is going to test the route that creates a recipe. So just like you can see, we require an access token to access this route. For example, if we went back to our recipes.py and we checked that specific endpoint for creating a recipe, so we see that it has a JWT required decorator, which means we require a JWT to access that token. So that means we have to make sure that we make use of our sign up and login functionality so that we get access to a token that we use to access uh, this route. To do that, we're just going to come and copy some code from the various tests I've been creating. So copy code from the login. So what I'll do is to actually say, I'll just copy all this logic. After copying this logic, I'll just come right here on the create and then paste it. After pasting this logic, the next thing I'll do is to actually access this, because if I print, what I'll do is to actually just print the login response .json. So if I print this, run my test again. So I run this test. So we have self-large indentation error. So let's try to fix this. So let's see, this is going to actually be, we fix that indentation error and come back. In this case, we expect to get the response, and this response is going to have our access token as well as our refresh token. So let's see, this is going to run. So once we run this, we see that it's running successfully. We are getting our access token as our refresh token. So let's try to see getting also, after getting the access token, so we can be able to access our access token from this response. So I'll do is to actually come within our code within our login test. Let me close this. So what I basically do is to sign up a test user, log in the test user, and then get the access token of this user. So this returns a dictionary. So to access the access token, what I'll have to do is to just say, so what I'll do is to actually just say access token. When I save this and try to run this, we are going to see, so let me try to actually also remove this. So that the only thing we have is the access token. So when I run this test API.py, we're going to only have our access token returned to us. And this is going to run our test as successful. So after doing this, I'm going to just simply come, and what we'll have to do is to actually pass this access token with our request that you're going to create a recipe. So to do that, I'll have to just come and say, so this is going to be the create a recipe response. So this is going to be a response for creating a recipe. And then this is going to be a self dot client dot post. So since we are going to send data to the API, we have to specify the JSON. So our JSON is going to be a dictionary that has the various JSON that we have. So the first thing we're going to pass within our JSON, we'll go to our recipes.py. So we need the title and the description. To do this, I'll just come and create a dictionary with a key of title. So this is going to be our title. And then our title, let's say, is going to be a test. Just call it test cookie for now. And then after doing this, so I'm going to come here and say this is going to be title test cookie, and then our description. So I'll say description is going to be equal to let's say test description. So I'll just call this test description for now. So after doing this, I'm going to also pass in the authorization header containing our bearer token. In this case, it's going to be the access token. So I'll put this access token within a variable called access token. And then this is going to be our access token. So I'll just come and then specify. So passing in headers within this request requires us to have what we call the headers parameter. So I'll just pass in our headers. So it's going to also be a dictionary. And then it will have the key of the header we want to pass in and then the value of that header. In this case, it's going to be an authorization header. And then it's going to have bearer and then the token. So in this case, I'm going to use an F string in passing this access token by saying access. This is going to be our access token. So I'll just pass it in as an access token, and we are going to see how this is going to work. So I can just simply come right here and then print, actually just access the status code if it is 201. So I'll just come and say status code. This is going to be status code, and it's going to be the create recipe response then status code. So I'll just come in here and say self dot assert equal. So I'll specify if the status code is equal to 201. So in this case, 201. Then come and run this test. So when I say Python test API.py, so this is going to be API.py, hoping that everything is fine. So in this case, we are having our status is equal to, so we've made a mistake. So when I fix this, I'm going to come and fix this. So this is supposed to be our status code, hoping that it's going to work. So in this case, we are having 405 is not equal to 201. That means we never specified our route. So let's specify our route. So our route is going to be slash. So when you go back here, creating our recipes with recipe slash recipe. So when I go back here, I'll just say recipe slash recipes. Save this. So when I come, I'll clear the terminal with Control L and then run our test again. So when I run this test, we see that now our test is running. So let's try to access the request, that the response that our server is returning. So we can do that by saying, I can actually just say print get recipe response dot. So this case we're going to say dot JSON. So when I save this, I'm going to come back to our terminal. Sorry for that. And then run python test api.py, and then we see that our recipe has been created with a status code that is 201. So we are done with actually getting this recipe with creating a recipe. We've done testing our recipe. So after doing that, the remaining recipes are the ones the remaining routes are the ones for updating and deleting our recipe. So to do this, I'm going to just come right here. So I'll need to create a recipe first. And then after creating, so I'll need the functionality for creating a recipe. So I'll just come and copy these. It's going to copy this. My code is kind of disorganized, but still you can be able to make a request, a pull request, and be able to change some of this. So my GitHub. What I'll do is to come copy this and then paste it right in here. So we basically have all this logic that signs up, say test user, logs in, accesses a token, and creates a recipe. So in this case, we shall have to get that specific recipe. So when I try to get, so what I'll do is to actually get one. So what I'll do is in this case to get one recipe. So what I'll do is to get one. So get one, I'll just say self dot client dot get. Then I'll be able to get because we are having one recipe in our database. So in this case, if I say so if let's say we get all recipes, so I mean get one recipe, so I will send to slash recipe slash, in this case will be id of one. So if I specify my id as one, then I say get one self.client.get, then I specify this to be an f string, so I'll use an f string, and then I pass in the id as our id. So if I get slash recipe, this will be slash recipe since we are getting one, and then pass in the id. So after doing this, I can be able to print. So when I print get one dot, so this is going to be JSON. So when we get one, let's try to run this and see. So I'm going to comment out all the other print statements that we have. Let's see, when I come here, I'm going to comment this out. Also going to comment, hoping that everything is commented. So if I come right here and try to test that route for getting only one. So we see that now it's returning one with an ID of one, and all this data are specific to that one recipe resource. So we want to update this recipe resource. So what we shall have to do is to actually pass in. So when you go to our recipes.py and go to that route that has updating, so we have it's JWT required, so we shall require an access token. So I need to go back to our test API.py. So what we shall do is to first I'll actually remove this for getting one. Then what we shall do is to actually send a request for updating. So now since we have our access token, we can be able to also use it to update. So what I'll do is to actually come right here. So we have our access token from here. I'll just come right in here, and then what I'll have to do is to make a request to the update. So I'll say update response going to be equal to this will be so update response we shall get self dot client dot so this case we are going to say dot post, since we are going to send a post request. Now the first thing we shall have to specify the JSON we're going to send with this. So I'm going to copy some of the JSON for creating a recipe. So I'll copy this, and when I come right in here, just paste it in here. So this is supposed to be a dictionary, then fix it by making this a dictionary. So actually first specify the route. So I specify the route as, sorry for that, come and do this at it. So I'll specify the route for updating. So it's going to be slash recipe slash a recipe. So I'll use an F string for now. So this is going to be recipe slash the recipe with an ID of the ID we specified at the top here. And then I'll put in the JSON we're going to send. So our JSON is going to be a dictionary containing this. So I'll try to make this. So after sending this JSON, one thing we shall also need is a header containing our token. I'll say headers going to be equal to a dictionary containing the header we are going to pass in. So this is going to be an authorization header. And then after passing this authorization header, I'm going to pass in a bearer and our access token. So I'll use an F string for now. So this is going to be F, then the access token. So let's try to see this. So if I say print, so in this case it's going to be print update response.json. Let's try to run this. So when I come to my terminal and then run our test file, so we see that this method is not allowed for the requested URL. So in this case, we actually did a post method. So what we need to do is to actually come and say self.client dot. In this case, we're going to say put. So since this is an update method, we need to say put. Then what we're going to do is to run test API.py. And hoping everything is running, it's supposed to return to us an updated resource. So now we see that test cookie and then test cookie description. So we can even change this to, let me say, test cookie updated and then test cookie description updated. So when I save this, I'll come and run Python test API.py. So then we see that our cookie has been updated successfully. So we can assert for different things such as the status code. So we can actually just say self dot assert equal, then the status code in this case is 200, and you can also say 200. Actually, in this case, it's going to be so I'll just come and say, just create a variable called status code and call it. So this is going to be our update status code. So just call it status code and then come right in here and then say status code. So when I come and run this, we shall see that our status code is going to be 200, which means okay, the server has updated our recipe. So we see that now our tests have run successfully. Now I'm going to come and right in here, I'll just test the last route, which is for deleting the recipe. Now I'll come and just carry out the same logic, most of the logic here, because you need to sign up a user, log in a user, get the access token, and then use that access token to delete that specific recipe. What I'll do is to I'll come and just come right here. So I'll just come right in here, copy this logic, come within our test delete recipe, paste this logic in here. So you're having sign up. When you sign up, you create a user. That user logs in. They create an access token. After creating the access token, then we create a recipe with that access token. Then we delete that recipe. That's what we want to do. So to do this, I'll just say delete. Each response is going to be equal to self dot client dot get. Let's first see our route within our recipe. So when you come this side, we have it being protected by the JWT required. So when I come here, I can say this is going to be the client dot delete. In this case, is going to be delete. Then we shall pass in the route. So in this case, we want our ID. So let's say an ID of 1, since we are going to have only one ID. So we're going to say ID is going to be 1. And then we say slash recipe is going to be slash recipe slash recipe slash this is going to be, so I'm going to use an f string to put in the ID. This is going to be a recipe with an ID of ID. Then we are going to basically send this request. Then if we see, we're going to just get a status code. So we shall say status code is going to be equal to this is going to be a delete response dot status code. So what I'll do is to actually just say sat. Actually, this will be self sat equal to so status code shall say if the status code is 200, and then so we are done with testing our delete route. So when we run this test file, say that we are having an error. Let's try to see how we're going to fix it. So basically it's 401. So I think it's because we specified the wrong route. So in this case, we're going to say, so let's try to see, oh sorry, going to be for recipes. So when you go right here, so having a 401 error, let's try to see how we're going to fix it. So slash recipe slash id. So when I run again, now, a quick fix to this error is we are going to be able to print the delete response JSON, like the response the server gives back as a result of creating this request to the delete route. When I print this, I'm going to save and run our test again. It will be able to show us the problem, to show us what's wrong. So when I run this test, so we see that we are missing an authorization header, and this is why it's giving us an error. So we're going to try to fix this by adding our authorization header, our bearer token in this case. What I'm going to do is to actually go to the top of our code, and then I'll copy this authorization header, just like you can see here in headers. So I'll copy the authorization header. After copying this, I'm going to simply come and paste it within our delete route. So right here I have the route that I'm sending to the request. So I'll put in the header, which has the authorization header containing our bearer token. So when I save this and run again, so we see that now our request is successful and our deleted recipe resource is being returned to us. So hoping that our tests are running successfully. We now see that all of our 8 tests have run successfully. In this video, we have learned how to carry out unit tests using Python and testing APIs with Flask. If you've liked this video, please go ahead and leave a like, share this video, and please subscribe to the channel if you're new, and because we talk about programming and related topics. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.